So I hope it's okay. I'll switch to English just because it's my current work language, and I would be more comfortable to speak in English now, and I would certainly make less mistakes. So good. Thank you very much for being here. It's a pleasure to be again in Mexico and sharing a bit of Integer experience on as a leader in vehicle SCR DEF market research. We introduced Integer a little bit yesterday, but just a quick overview of what we are. We are a team of about 50 consultants, most of us based in London, UK, and we work on a range of reports, subscriptions, consultancy projects, and conferences. It's our conference team organizing this event and a series of other events on STR and DEF around the world. And I am Fabricio Cardoso, and I run our research on these topics, so for the automotive sector and on the use of urea in automotive. So let me briefly go through the plan for this presentation. I'll start with a very short introduction about Integer and our current work in these areas, and also include some of the recent news to clarify for those who heard about it. Then I'll run through how we established our projections for the North American SCR and DEF forecasts, but even if I'll be talking mainly about US and Canada, the methodology we apply is the same across the globe. We'll take a quick look at the current DEF supply infrastructure in North America, because it's part of the topic, lessons learned from the North American market. We can already, even if the Mexican market is taking off now, there are similarities, but there are some substantial differences between those markets. So it's important to take into account how the supply chain is going to be established. And then we also take a look at some of our Mexican and global DEF consumption figures and some of the reasons behind our numbers. We'll have a discussion on those. So if I, just like before we, I'll go through a few introduction slides, but before I dive into the subject, just like some news that were quite exciting on our side. You may have been familiar with Integer from other conferences, and you may know Argus Media from their publications on a range of commodities. But for those who are not familiar, so Argus Media bought Integer Research in last month, and there were a lot of synergies, and the work from both companies were very complementary. Argus has been leader on price reporting for a range of commodities, including fertilizer commodities, and Integer has been doing long-term outlooks for most fertilizer commodities, and also overlapping with automotive and energy sectors. So we're all very exciting with this acquisition, but of course there is a transition, and we're still operating as Integer Research. Of course, talking more and more with Argus, and if some of you are subscribers of any of our publications, be assured they remain the same for the time being. If you are talking to other people from Integer on conferences or on any other matter, keep talking to the same people. At some point there would be synergies and there would be changes, but for the time being, it's still business as usual for both sides. Good. And then, as I mentioned in the beginning, Integer has developed a quite comprehensive, work on emission standards, and then going to after treatment, SCR, and DEF. So these we had like for this financial year, July 18 until June 19. We are publishing 25 reports on these markets, more than any other consultants company. And a few report, and they have some of those reports are more of a newsletter format, reporting on current supply chain developments in some of the key markets, and some are more on the long-term outlooks for specific regions. North America is covered with an annual report that is updated every November, and with a monitor North America that is updated every quarter. Mexico doesn't have a dedicated report on its own, but it's covered by the quarterly automotive grade urea and global SCR forecast services that looks at 20 different regions, the main 20 regions today in the world consuming DEF. Good. So that was just for to make you a bit more familiar with our work at Integer, but just running through now some of the fundamentals behind our SCR and DEF forecast for North America. So as you can imagine, the main driver for SCR and DEF in any region is vehicle sales, and primarily trucks and buses. So we start looking at vehicle sales for trucks and buses in any region, and then we, from our methodology follows like a rough indication is from total vehicle sales, we look at diesel vehicle sales, and then from diesel vehicle sales, we look at SCR equipped vehicle sales. Of course, each step needs a different approach, and we have a dedicated team of five analysts just focusing on understanding all these fundamentals for these markets. So these are just a quick overview of historical class 4 to 8 vehicle sales in North America, US and Canada, and then from the historical vehicle sales, first there's a gap which refers to non-diesel trucks, essentially natural gas, some natural gas trucks, but also some hybrid electric trucks, and particularly in the US, class 4 and 5, which correspond to medium-duty trucks in Mexico, there's still a reasonable share of gasoline engines. So we deduct all those non-diesel engines first, and then we look at after-treatment technologies and what each OEM is choosing in terms of after-treatment technology, to then understand the size of the SCR market. So so the green chart would be the green bars would represent SCR sales in North America, and these are the trucks that are on the road and requiring DEF. This is just to illustrate that diesel penetration is not 100% for class 4 to 8 trucks, and as I said, particularly for the lower end of medium duty trucks, there are quite a lot of petrol and some hybrid trucks available. So then we have to take those into account. And we also look at the light vehicle market, which at some point it looked like we had diesel engines popping up, becoming a very interesting market in North America. But as you know, there was a bit of an issue in 2015 with the emission scandal that compromised sales of diesel cars and light-duty vehicles from Volkswagen and other manufacturers. At some point, we expected that, and what this chart is showing is diesel car sales in US and Canada, and diesel light truck sales in US and Canada. So as you can see, on the passenger car side, it's virtually no more diesel cars. There are still a few models available, but we haven't seen a recovery since. The market is still quite, was very strongly damaged. On the light-duty truck, there's a wider range of options, and also, we see a decline from 2015, but still volumes are, the impact was milder than for diesel passenger cars. So taking all of this into account, we look at the SCR fleet, meaning the active SCR, the active number of trucks, cars, machinery in operation and requiring DEF. It could be, in the first approach, this fleet would be cumulative SCR sales of SCR trucks, but then trucks leave the market, trucks are replaced, are resold to other countries, and have accidents and so on. So we need to take all these into account as well, and then estimate the size of the actual population of vehicles requiring SCR. And it's effectively these SCR fleets that will be the main driver for DEF consumption. Once we know the size of the SCR fleet, we look at typical dosing rates for DEF in terms of some manufacturers tend to report as a percentage of diesel consumption, but more and more manufacturers are talking on gallons of DEF per 100 or 1,000 miles. Also because, and then it's a better way of taking into account different fuel efficiencies from different engine sizes. And we also look at typical distance traveled by class and country. So between class 4 and a class 8 truck, there are significant differences if the trucks are long haul, short haul, urban delivery. If we're talking about a vocational truck for that stays in an urban area, only refuse trucks, they all need to be taken into account in different ways. So we integrate all these to our model to come up with reasonable estimates on the DEF consumption. And this is our current estimate for the North American market, again, US and Canada, with class 4 to 8 trucks representing the majority of the consumption, and within that class 4 to 8, range, it's primarily class 8 trucks requiring DEF. The market for passenger cars and light vehicles is still very small, and our forecast now is much smaller than what we had 3 years ago, when we thought that diesel cars were going to remain a strong option in North America. And off-highway equipment, it's also not the largest segment, but there is a segment that is set to start growing at faster rates from next year onwards, because some flexibility schemes on emissions are running out, and then pretty much every single equipment within a specific power band range would be on SCR. But then the question is, of course, how things are going to change in the near future, which it's also a very complicated topic, and I'll try to be short on this, because just this slide would deserve a 20-minute presentation on it. There's been a lot of recent changes on the regulatory aspects in the US, but just a brief overview. The US is currently at EPA 2010 for heavy-duty trucks, and this is essentially driving SCR across the range for all diesel engines. In parallel, there are fuel economy standards implemented in the first phase in 2014 with intermediate SAB, some intermediate requirements, and then final requirements last year, and stricter fuel economy requirements if you were here last morning is what we explained in those charts and graphics. Stricter fuel economy requirements would drive a higher use of the SCR technology, and directly meaning higher dosing rates. There's a second round of GHG greenhouse gas standards planned for to start in 2021, but then in 3 steps. For the first step, we only see higher dosing rates, but no background technology in terms of competition to SCR. 2024 is less certain. Then it's where we would see some other technologies who could compete and make some of the trucks, the diesel trucks, without SCR. But the interesting bit is in 2027. The 2027 would implement much stricter greenhouse gas standards compared to the current ones available. In the meantime, California is planning to implement ultra-low NOx standards, which will drive a higher use of natural gas trucks, hybrids, electrics, but also within the diesel trucks, we would certainly see other technologies come into place, and probably SCR would we think SCR would remain, but at lower dosing rates than what they are now, because you have to introduce other technologies to ensure those ultra-low NOx levels. If that and then there was a discussion if what would happen between California and at a federal level. California wanted to go ahead even without the with the EPA not going through going forward with the legislation. That would certainly not be a huge change if legislation was only implemented in California. We would certainly see a pre-buy effect in the state the year before, and more a higher share of natural gas trucks, but no major change at a federal level. What made things quite different now is that 2 days ago, the EPA indicated it will move forward with an ultra-low NOx level standards, but for 2027. And then if ultra-low standards apply across the 50 states, then we would see more expensive trucks with other technologies to ensure higher fuel efficiency, but also very, very low NOx. And then lower dosing rates, which would mean in the longer term that the market, the DF market would start decreasing over time. But this is, again, because it's the SCR fleet that drives the DF consumption and not the sales of new trucks only. It will take 15 to 20 years to see all trucks on the road under the new standards. Again, that was a short explanation on what's going on and what's we're likely to see, but we can of course go more into this detail later on. Good. Take a look now at the DF supply infrastructure. So as we saw in the previous slide, EPA 10 has been driving the use of SCR in the majority of heavy-duty trucks in North America, and that led to, and then since then, an entire DEF supply chain has been developing. I'll go quickly through this also because we talked also about it yesterday, but there are, this is a summary of how DEF can be made in North America. It can come directly from urea plants, from import terminals, and from dilution dissolving facilities. And once DF is made, it can be supplied to truck fleets, filling stations, OEMs, dealerships, convenience stores. There's a wide range of end user distributors and retailers. Among there are 19 urea plants currently in operation and capable of making DEF or automotive grade urea for DEF production. but they are not evenly spread across the US. They are to some extent concentrated in the Midwest and Gulf Coast areas of the country. And then to fill the gap and closer to other consumption markets without an urea plant very close, it's where we see most of the dilution dissolving facilities, which we count over 120 now in operation across, and it's still a very fragmented market, although some consolidation starts to take place, and more consolidation will take place within the next few months, and particularly next year. And then just taking a look at the import markets, said depending on where you are in the country, it can be more convenient to import solid pure urea rather than obtaining urea from domestic urea suppliers. And we've been tracking these movements of urea. It represents approximately 8 to 9% of the current DF consumption, meaning domestic urea producers are still responsible for the large majority of DEF made in the US. But and then also based on that previous map, we would expect that South California tends to be one of the main ports receiving pure urea, but also other ports, West, Gulf, and East Coasts. And there's also imports of DEF, not much DEF final solution coming into North America anymore, but 50% solution coming from European plants, and also coming to a range of about 10 import terminals located closer to main consumption markets, West, East, and Gulf Coasts. We also look in our studies at how DEF is sold. Of course, there is no official data on the main market channels. So these numbers are, of course, our assessment based on regular conversations with all major market players, but and then our projections and how we understand trends are developing. So the current market, about 70% of the market is either private bulk to fleets or retail bulk to independent drivers at truck stops. And we see those markets developing, and particularly truck stops in North America account for a higher share than in other regions, including Europe, where the network is also quite comprehensive. Good. So that was, our an overview of the North American market, which is, of course, going to be mirrored in Mexico in a range of aspects. But then just wanted to bring also some overview of our global and Mexican numbers. We look at about 22 regions separately, regions or countries, but like 20 plus main consumption markets. And we also look at some markets where DF consumption is very, very small now, but likely to develop in the future. And we put everything together to have an idea of the size of the global automotive grade urea market. So these are our most updated numbers. We update, because all regions are changing all the time, we update all our numbers on a quarterly basis. So we already know for next month, there are a few countries we need to go back and review assumptions and talk to the market again, because we know some countries need to be adjusted. But 2018, 9.6 billion liters currently consumed, the large majority Europe and North America. But then when you move over across the forecast, Europe remaining the main region, North America second, but very close to China. China is and India going from virtually nothing now and becoming the fourth main market in 10 years' time. India and China are, broadly speaking, moving to an Euro 6 standards in the same time frame as Mexico. India is introducing Euro 6 equivalent in April 2020, and China in 2021, but with some cities implementing one year ahead. But what makes these regions becoming a larger market compared to Mexico is that truck sales at start are 20 times high in China and 10 times high in India. Yeah. And then these are our current estimates for the Mexican markets, which is of course every market in the beginning and still not with a legislation driving a strong implementation of a widespread implementation of SCR in heavy-duty trucks. These markets are, of course, much more difficult to track and to be accurate in the estimates, but we do our best, and we keep talking to market players to get our best assessments. So our current understanding is that the market would be around 30 million liters this year, and likely to grow to around 50 next year, and around 90 in 2021. These are all end-of-year figures, by the way, and likely to become a sizable market within the forecast. Yes?
Clarification of the box for 2021, is that Euro 6?
Yes, yes. So January 2021, the plan is for EPA 10 or Euro 6. Oh, sorry, 6. Thanks. Yeah, I had a note of that, so thank you. Yeah, it's Euro 5 as a transitional period 2020, and then Euro 6 2021. But again, these numbers are, again, our current best assessments of the market. There are a few key variables we will have to take into account, including how enforcement is going to take place. Part of our assessment for all the other countries is how much cheating is happening and how much we need to, what is the potential market and then the actual market. Something is like use of defeat devices, counterfeit urea, addition of water, all these, they're not happening in North America, they're happening in Central Eastern Europe, but emerging markets have been a huge problem, and it's very important if government wants to see the market Euro 6 effectively polluting as Euro 6 trucks. It's important to ensure that defeat devices don't become widespread, and depending on what happens, of course, we could have a stronger impact on the volumes. Good. And this, just to summarize, this is our take on global supply demand of automotive grade urea. Of course, not only solid, in the solid form, but all urea going to the automotive sector across all forms. And then key difference between these two charts. First one is looking at total supply and total demand. So, and then we can see that because of the nature of the product, most of the product is, most of the consumption comes from domestic suppliers. Europe, North America, and China, which are the main consumption markets now, they are primarily supplied by domestic urea producers. And then the second chart looks at urea trade. So we take the first chart, we take out all flows representing production for domestic consumption, and then the picture becomes quite different. And then from the main current suppliers of automotive grade urea for other regions have been Russia, China, and Europe. Until 2 years ago, it was primarily China and Europe, but now Russian urea producers have been trading much more product and selling to different regions, including North America, but also Latin America and Europe. So that's it. That's what some of the elements I want to bring. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. And if you also want to discuss any of these elements in more detail, let me know or speak to one of my colleagues. Thank you. Good. Any questions? Yes, there's one here.
Veo en tu gráfica anterior algunas columnas o barras que no tienen cifras. ¿A
Sí.
qué se debe?
Algunas de nuestras informaciones son exclusivas a los clientes, a los clientes que compran nuestros relatorios, pero nosotros intenté aportar el máximo que pude para que sea una presentación comprensible. Pero si hay preguntas, cuando
Y
recibí...
hay además también otra información que hablas de México como
Sí.
una proyección, pero después hablas de todos los países, la demanda y la oferta.
Sí.
Pero ahí no se ve realmente cómo está específicamente la de México.
No, porque nuestro estudio de oferta, demanda y tráfico de producto hacemos por región global y tenemos América Latina como una región. Tenemos en nuestros estudios el detalle país
Pero sí
para cada
tienen
país.
sí tienen la información específica de México.
Sí, lo tenemos.
Para esto tenemos que comprarla.
Sí.
Okay.
No, y también para...
Pensé que en este foro iban a ponerla.
No, esto es un foro de discusión sobre acerca de los temas principales del mercado, tendencias, para que la industria se ponga en conjunto, pero también es parte de nuestra actividad vender información específica acerca de algunos mercados.
Ok, gracias.
¿Podrías ser tan amable de decirnos o de explicarnos todo lo que podríamos sacar de tus gráficas si estuviéramos inscritos, para tratar de ver si es un paquete de especial que nos conviene o nomás con la suscripción? O sea, todo lo que tú puedes plasmar o lo que les llega a los miembros en esas gráficas, porque que queda muy abierta, ¿no? Entonces yo quisiera saber qué es, al inscribirme contigo, qué voy a obtener de esas gráficas.
Sí, bueno, cuando todos las empresas que suscriben a esos relatorios reciben todos los datos detrás de los gráficos, los datos de cómo empezar, desde ventas de camiones, ventas de vehículos diésel, SCR y todas las nuestro estudio para aportar, para explicar las cifras y también y los números, y también tiempo para discutir los estudios con los analistas que trabajaron para obtener los números. No sé si era eso que preguntaba. Sí. Yes, any other questions? No. Ok, gracias de nuevo. Y entonces tenemos ahora un descanso de 30, 40 minutos, no sé exactamente. Y regresamos a las 11 para continuar las presentaciones del día. Gracias.